Hey everybody, welcome back for lesson 3.4 part 2. So we're still expanding expressions here, but now you'll see we are expanding expressions with negative factors on the outside of the parentheses. So if you want to follow along, page 156, which I did write it up here, so page 156, and the skill here is expanding algebraic expressions with negative factors. So this is where really applying your negative rules is going to be important. So we're still kind of functioning the same way. I've got -3 times -2/3 a. So I know a negative times a negative is a positive. So I am going to put a positive here just to help me organize my thinking. So 3, this is 3/1, right? And I'm ignoring the negative because I've applied it right here. Times 2/3 a. So 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 3 is 3. And then we can't forget the variable a. So that's just the multiplication that I did there. 3 times -2/3 a is the same as saying positive 6/3 a. Because a negative times a negative is a positive. And our numerator, 3 times 2 is 6. Our denominator, 1 times 3 is 3. So I've got positive 6/3a, or 6/3 a. Now I have a negative, can't forget that negative sign right there, -3 times positive 1/5. So we know a negative times a positive is a negative. So we're going to write it like a subtraction sign. Now over on the side, let's just do this out. 3/1 times 1/5. 3 times 1 is 3. 1 times 5 is 5. This does not have a variable on the end of it, so I don't need to worry about that. So -3 times positive 1/5. Negative times a positive is a negative. The numerator, 3 times 1 is 3. And this would be like having a denominator of 1 times the denominator of 5 is 5. But I would still simplify this one more step because we know 6 divided by 3 is 2a minus 3/5 would be the most proper way of showing this expanded expression. And at this point, we can drop the positive sign because we don't need it. Okay? Makes sense? All right, so this one, it's on page 157, and you're going to see it and be like, oh my God, this rocks my world. I don't even know what to do with this. We've got a negative outside of a parentheses of -4/10 k minus 2 5/10. Truthfully, the easiest way to think about this is that the negative, remember we've talked so much about a negative sign meaning the opposite of? If you just have a negative on its own, it's saying the opposite of the expression that's in the parentheses. So what is the opposite of -4/10 k? It's literally 4/10 k. The opposite of negative is a positive, and it stays 4/10 k. What's the opposite of -2.5? Well, the opposite is positive 2.5. Is that so easy? But in case you don't believe me, you're like, Mrs. Sayward, there's no way it could be that easy. I'm going to prove to you that it can be. This is the same as saying -1, right? Because putting a 1 here wouldn't change the value of any of these numbers. -1 times -4/10 k is positive. Negative times a negative is a positive. It's 1. So it just stays the same. 4/10 k. -1 times -2.5. Negative times a negative is a positive. That 1 doesn't change the value of that decimal, and it literally is the same thing. Answer to this is 4/10 k plus 2.5 or 2.5. Isn't that so easy? Now do you believe me? Because I didn't just tell you it was the opposite. I showed you why mathematically it works. So could you do that step? Yeah. But if you ever just see a negative outside of a parentheses on its own, you would just write the opposite of the terms that are on the inside of the parentheses. All right, last one. before you do some ed puzzle questions, which I am going to assign correctly today because I didn't do it right yesterday, but I'm a quick learner. So negative 1/3 times P plus 2Q. All right, so this is like saying negative 1/3 times, and like we've talked about before, this would be just like having the coefficient 1 there. So negative 1/3 times positive 1P. So we're going to distribute this to the first term. A negative times a positive is a negative. 1/3 times 1P is the same as saying, well, 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 1 is 3. And we can't forget the variable, I don't like where I put that one. We can't forget the variable P. That makes sense, right? Negative 1/3 times P is the same as saying negative 1/3 P. Now we've got to distribute our fraction outside of the parentheses to our second term. Negative times a positive is a negative. So notice I'm putting my signs in so I don't forget it. Then I'm just going to do straight up regular multiplication. 1/3 times 2Q. Notice I just put my 2Q over 1 just to keep my numerators and denominators lined up. 1 times 2Q is 2Q. 3 times 1 is 3. So negative 1/3 times positive 2Q is negative 2/3 Q. Make sense? Well, you can't see me. Does that make sense to everybody what we did here? Negative 1/3 times positive 1/5. Negative times a positive is a negative. 1/3 times 1 is 1/3. Negative 1/3 times positive 2Q. Negative times a positive is a negative. 1/3 times 2Q. 1 times 2 in the numerator is 2. 3 times 1 in the denominator is 3. And then we don't want to forget our variable Q. Fabulous, right? And you will see, I do my work on the side, even though some of you I know like to do it in your head. And I noticed a couple silly errors, particularly with decimals, on yesterday's work because I think kids are doing them in their head. So just take the extra step and do it on the side just to be extra sure because you're dealing with negative signs and variables and coefficients and lots of new stuff. So just take your time. This is like all about slow and steady. It's not really a race, like wins a race, but slow and steady is going to have the work that you don't have to go back and revisit it. When you rush through things and do it quickly, that's when you have to go back and revisit your work. So I'm going to stop now, give you some ed puzzle questions, and we'll finish the next part of the lesson. Bye.